November 8, 1944, Lorraine, France. Rain is hammering the flooded Say Valley when, at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army opens one of the heaviest artillery concentrations it has yet fired in Europe. The darkness flashes white along the horizon. Shells tear through German trenches, smash telephone lines, churn farm fields into black fountains of mud, and hammer villages that only minutes earlier seem asleep. American infantrymen crouch beneath ponchos and steel helmets, waiting for the barrage to lift. Many have spent part of the previous evening doing something that seems strangely ordinary before something so violent. They have written home, and when the guns finally shift forward, those letters suddenly become more than mail. Across the line, German officers are about to receive another lesson in the strange character of the American soldier. They already believe they understand him. German intelligence reports describe Americans as dependent on artillery, tanks, aircraft, fuel, motor transport, and overwhelming quantities of ammunition. German training staffs criticize American caution and predictability. Yet the same reports admit something disturbing. American commanders learn quickly. American artillery responds with frightening speed, and American attacks are prepared with a thoroughness the Wehrmacht cannot easily match. By late 1944, German battle experiences are circulating lessons drawn from fighting the Americans, and the picture they create is far more complicated than Nazi propaganda wants German soldiers to believe. One detail becomes especially revealing in the way later soldiers and historians describe that American preparation, the letters written before battle. The surviving German battle experiences do not preserve the famous phrase word for word that Americans write home before every attack, rather than afterward. That wording is better understood as a summary of what German observers are seeing than as a literal quotation from one officer. But the behavior behind it is real. American soldiers write constantly. Mail follows them across oceans, beaches, ruined railroads, muddy roads, and forward supply routes. By early October, Third Army is receiving accumulated correspondence on a special daily train carrying hundreds of tons of mail, because commanders understand that a letter can matter almost as much to morale as food, cigarettes, or sleep. And before an attack, there is often one precious commodity that disappears the moment the firing begins: time. Before H-hour, men wait. They clean weapons, check ammunition, tighten bootlaces, study maps they may never see again, drink coffee from metal cups, smoke too many cigarettes, listen to artillery registering in the distance. Some gamble, some pray, some sleep, and some take out paper and begin with the same deceptively simple words written by millions of servicemen during the war. Dear Mum, dear Dad, darling, dearest. They cannot describe where they are. Censors forbid that. They cannot reveal tomorrow's objective, but they can say they are fine, that the food is improving, that they received the package, that they miss home, and that everyone should not worry. The ritual says something profound about the American army that has reached Lorraine in November 1944. These men are not professional warriors raised inside a militarized state. Many are former clerks, farmers, machinists, teachers, salesmen, college students, truck drivers, mechanics, and factory workers. They carry photographs in their wallets. They know baseball scores. They argue about girlfriends and wives. They remember kitchens, front porches, radio programs, neighborhood bars, school dances, and Sunday dinners. The Wehrmacht sees an industrial military machine advancing toward Germany, but inside that machine are hundreds of thousands of civilians temporarily dressed as soldiers, and every letter home keeps one foot planted in the world they expect to return to. That expectation does not make them fearless. It may make the fear sharper. A soldier who believes life after the war is possible has something enormous to lose. When officers issue attack orders, the infantryman does not become an abstraction called manpower. He remains someone's son, someone's husband, someone's father. He may have spent the previous night describing Christmas plans to people 3,000 miles away, while knowing that at dawn he will cross a field covered by German machine guns. That contradiction is what makes the letters so important. They allow him to speak as the person he was, before he must act as the soldier he has become. And on November 8, 1944, thousands of those soldiers are about to discover whether those two identities can survive the same morning. The men moving toward the Say belong principally to Major General Manton S. Eddy's 12th Corps. Eddy commands a formidable force, the veteran 35th and 80th Infantry Divisions, the comparatively new 26th Infantry Division, the 4th and 6th Armored Divisions, 17 Field Artillery Battalions, roughly 9 Engineer Battalions, Tank Destroyer Units, Anti-Aircraft Battalions, separate Tank Battalions, and Mechanized Cavalry. The objective is ambitious. Break the German line in Lorraine, drive northeast toward the Saar, ultimately reach the Rhine. Patton does not merely want another local victory, he wants motion restored to an army that has spent weeks staring at mud, fortifications, rivers, and an enemy that refuses to collapse. Only 3 months earlier, Third Army seems unstoppable. After the Normandy breakout, Patton's columns race across France with astonishing speed. German formations retreat. American armored spearheads cover distances that would have been impossible only weeks earlier inside the Normandy hedgerows. But speed creates its own enemy. Gasoline, ammunition, replacement vehicles, food, bridging equipment, and spare parts have to travel hundreds of miles from the invasion beaches. By September, the Allied logistical system is stretched. The advance slows. German defenses stiffen around Metz and the Moselle. Rain arrives, roads deteriorate. Tanks that once race along French highways now sink to their tracks in Lorraine fields. The war that looks mobile in August begins resembling the Western Front of another generation. Patton hates the pause. He believes the Germans must be struck continuously before they can rebuild. Yet the Germans are rebuilding anyway. Across Third Army's front stands General der Panzertruppe Otto von Knobelsdorff's First Army, part of Army Group G under General Hermann Balck. The German force is battered, under strength, short of fuel, short of vehicles, and increasingly dependent on improvised formations. But it remains dangerous. German infantry knows how to use villages, reverse slopes, woods, mines, anti-tank guns, and pre-registered artillery. A battalion that cannot hold open ground may turn a stone village into a fortress. A few panthers hidden behind a ridge can stop an American armored column. Every mile east becomes more expensive. By early November, the German deployment opposite 12th Corps includes the 361st Volksgrenadier Division, the 559th Volksgrenadier Division, and the weakened 48th Division. Behind them sits the most important mobile reserve available locally, the 11th Panzer Division. On November 8th, it possesses only 19 Panzer IVs, but 50 new Panthers, machines whose long 75mm guns can kill American Shermans at ranges that terrify tank crews. Balck wants local reserves ready for immediate counterattack, but his divisions are too thin to create the depth he would prefer. If Patton hits several sectors at once, there may not be enough German armor to close every breach. The Americans have their own weakness. The weather is atrocious. Rain begins on November 5th and barely stops. On November 7th, a downpour settles over Lorraine for 24 hours. Streams become rivers. Rivers leave their banks. Footpaths disappear. Fields become brown lakes. Men marching toward assembly areas sink ankle-deep, then calf-deep, sometimes knee-deep. Trucks slide into ditches. Tanks spin their tracks without moving. Aircraft, normally one of the most feared instruments of American warfare, are largely grounded. Major General Eddy worries that attacking in these conditions is madness. Patton sees the same weather and reaches the opposite conclusion. The Germans will believe no one could attack in it. Bradley has already asked whether Third Army can move before the main Allied offensive farther north. Patton says he can attack on 24 hours' notice. The plan ultimately fixes November 8 as the day if flying weather does not improve. It does not. Patton sends the code words, "Play ball." There is no postponement. On the evening of November 7th, infantrymen struggle forward through darkness and rain toward their lines of departure. Packs grow heavier as canvas absorbs water. Rifle slings become slick. Socks are already wet before the first shot. Somewhere in barns, cellars, trucks, and temporary billets behind them, outgoing mail bags contain letters that may reach America long after the men who wrote them face the morning. This is where the phrase about writing before the attack begins to make sense. American warfare is increasingly scheduled warfare. H-hour matters. Artillery tables matter. Engineer timetables matter. Tank infantry coordination matters. Communications matter. Ammunition allocation matters. Units know often many hours in advance, that they are moving. The exact objective remains censored from letters, but the soldier knows something is coming. Before the attack, there may be nervous stillness. Afterward, there may be no company command post where it stood before, no dry paper, no light, no certainty that the writer still possesses his pack, his pen, his hands, or his life. So the letter goes first, because battle does not promise an afterward. At 5 a.m. on November 8th, American artillery begins preparing parts of the front. At 6 the main assault starts. The 26th Infantry Division advances on the 12th Corps, right with the 104th, 101st, and 328th Infantry Regiments abreast. In the center, the 35th Division attacks principally with the 137th and 320th Infantry. On the left, the 80th Division moves with the 317th, 318th, and 319th Infantry Regiments. The barrage walks ahead through darkness and mist. German field telephone wires snap, dugouts shake, trees explode into splinters, earth pours into trenches. Men who survive the shelling rise through smoke, only to see American infantry appearing through the rain. Within 24 hours, 20th Corps artillery fires 21,933 rounds. The number matters because it illustrates exactly what German reports mean when they complain that American infantry arrives surrounded by machinery. This is not simply a line of riflemen walking forward. It is a system. Forward observers call coordinates. Fire direction centers calculate solutions. Guns miles apart combine their shells on the same target. Engineers prepare crossings. Tank destroyers cover roads. Medical detachments prepare evacuation routes. Trucks bring ammunition forward. Signal units keep headquarters connected. And when weather eventually improves, fighter bombers return overhead. The individual GI may be frightened, soaked, inexperienced, or exhausted, but behind him stands an organization designed to keep applying force. German frontline troops are stunned. Some prisoners say they believe the positions along the Say are essentially a winter line, where operations will remain quiet until spring. Their assumption is understandable. The landscape itself seems to forbid movement. Yet that assumption is precisely what Patton exploits. German intelligence has detected unusual American vehicle activity, and some officers even suspect Patton might attack on November 8th, the second anniversary of the Allied landings in North Africa. But German headquarters does not shift enough strength to meet the blow. Later, German officers agree that American preparation, concealment, and camouflage achieve tactical surprise. On the right, the 104th Infantry drives toward Vic-sur-Seine. American guns lift at 6 o'clock. Infantrymen surge into the town, where German troops have failed to demolish bridges completely. The fight is short and violent. Doors burst inward, rifles crack inside narrow streets, grenades bounce into rooms. Muddy soldiers move along stone walls while bullets cut chips from masonry. At Moyenvik, the 2nd Battalion of the 101st Infantry attacks after the 101st Field Artillery Battalion pounds Hill 310 and rolls a barrage through the village. Surprise is nearly complete. Positions that are supposed to delay an army begin disappearing in hours. But the Germans are already searching for somewhere to stop the penetration. In the center, the 35th Division discovers that artillery supremacy cannot erase geography. The 137th Infantry pushes toward the Osson Creek and La Neuveville. The 320th Infantry faces the Forêt de Château-Salins and the village of Friends, where German troops are dug deeply into positions hardened by weeks of shelling. American planners need Friends because the road through it is vital for tanks and supply vehicles. Without the road, infantry moving into the forest must be supplied by carrying parties. Men haul ammunition boxes through mud that grips their boots like wet cement. Mortar rounds splash into soaked fields. Machine guns fire from buildings that appear ruined until they suddenly come alive. The assault on Friends becomes exactly the kind of battle the American system is designed to avoid but cannot always escape. The 3rd Battalion, 320th Infantry, attacks with tank support and gets into the village. But the German defenders do not collapse. They fight through the night and into the next day. Cellars become firing positions. Rubble blocks streets. Tanks cannot simply drive around because the surrounding ground is nearly impassable. Each surviving German position delays the road opening, and each hour of delay keeps American armor from exploiting the breakthrough. The Great Offensive is beginning successfully everywhere. Yet one stubborn village proves how a handful of determined men can slow thousands. Farther north, the 80th Infantry Division faces the swollen Saale itself. Engineers throw footbridges across water that has risen beyond normal banks. Some bridges wash away. Assault troops climb into small boats and paddle through darkness under the weight of weapons and ammunition. At Nomeny, men of the 318th Infantry cross while German mortar shells begin dropping on the far bank. A fortified village waits ahead. What appears on the operational map as a small circle beside a river turns into shattered houses, blocked lanes, concealed firing ports, and close-range violence. The fighting around Nomeny costs more than 100 American casualties before supporting tanks finally help crush the position. The battlefield becomes intensely personal. An artillery statistic may say 20,000 shells. A divisional map may show arrows moving northeast. But at ground level, a soldier sees a friend fall face first into brown water. A medic crawls toward a wounded man, while mortar fragments whip through tree branches. A Sherman throws a track and sits helpless beside a road, while its crew works in freezing rain. A rifle squad reaches a hedgerow and discovers that the next 50 yards are covered by a German machine gun. There is no grand strategy inside those 50 yards. There is only the question of who moves first, who fires first, and whether the next letter home will ever be written. Near Eppley, the 317th Infantry crosses the Saale using footbridges, rubber boats, and fords. The regiment moves around the village rather than simply hammering straight through it. That willingness to bypass, isolate, and continue forward is one reason German officers increasingly respect American tactical adaptation. Yet the advance is not clean. Late on November 8th, German artillery catches an American company as it digs in on the forward slope of Hill 237. Shells tear through the position. Officers are hit, the company suffers heavily, and its leadership is effectively destroyed. For a few minutes, the situation looks like the kind of fracture a German counterattack might exploit. Then the battlefield produces one of those abrupt reversals that make combat impossible to predict. Near dusk, a German infantry company, apparently moving forward to attack, crosses directly in front of another American battalion. The Americans open fire. Machine guns hammer the formation. Riflemen shoot into silhouettes emerging through the rain and failing light. Men scatter, fall, or dive for cover. The German force that expects to strike an American weakness instead walks into concentrated fire and is devastated. The same battlefield that seems to reward one side at 5 o'clock can punish it minutes later, and the fighting is only entering its second day. By nightfall, the 80th Division has established 10 bridges across the Saale. Communications behind German forward positions are badly damaged. Several units are overrun. The 1st Battalion of the German 126th Regiment is effectively destroyed around Nomeny, while another fortress battalion is nearly erased. American tactical surprise has succeeded, yet nobody at 12th Corps headquarters can look at the weather, the roads, or the casualty reports and imagine the campaign will now become easy. The Germans still possess the Delme Ridge, they still possess armor, and the farther American units advance, the farther their trucks, ambulances, ammunition carriers, kitchens, engineers, and mail clerks have to follow. That last item sounds almost absurd beside fuel and ammunition, but it is not. Mail is treated as a military requirement because morale is a military resource. A soldier who receives 3 letters from home is not necessarily braver than a soldier who receives none, but he is reminded why he is enduring the war. During the Second World War, American servicemen produce personal correspondence on an extraordinary scale. V-mail reduces weight by photographing letters onto microfilm for overseas transportation. Sensors examine outgoing correspondence. Postal units chase formations as fronts move. Mailbags appear in places that civilians would barely recognize as inhabited. Even near combat zones, soldiers gather around incoming sacks with an urgency usually reserved for rations. A German soldier experiences mail too, of course. Feldpost is central to Wehrmacht life. German troops write enormous numbers of letters. They also carry photographs and worry about their families. But by late 1944, the two postal worlds are separating. Germany itself is being bombed. Railroads are damaged. Families are displaced. Soldiers receive news of destroyed homes and missing relatives. The American soldier may complain that a package arrives crushed, or that a girlfriend has not written in 2 weeks. But behind him is a homeland almost untouched by enemy bombing. To German eyes, that difference can look like another form of American material superiority, not just more shells and trucks, but an apparently inexhaustible connection to normal civilian life. The letters also expose a paradox German propaganda struggles to explain. Nazi ideology insists that Americans are soft, commercial, racially mixed, undisciplined, and unwilling to endure sacrifice. Yet these supposedly soft civilians keep attacking. They complain about officers, weather, food, mud, army bureaucracy, and the impossibility of finding dry socks. They dream openly about going home. They do not pretend to love war. Then H-hour arrives, and many of them advance anyway. German officers can criticize their dependence on artillery, but artillery is part of American doctrine, precisely because American commanders see no virtue in losing infantrymen when steel can be fired first. That philosophy appears in German assessments. American planning, German observers complain, often seems excessively cautious and methodical. Attacks may use overwhelming supporting arms to force a relatively narrow penetration. The American preference is to make success as certain as possible, rather than seek danger for its own sake. German reports mock aspects of this behavior, but also recommend studying American coordination between infantry, tanks, artillery, and aircraft. They praise the speed and accuracy of American artillery communications, and recognize that American commanders learn from failure surprisingly quickly. What Nazi propaganda calls cowardice increasingly looks, at the operational level, like efficiency. And that changes the meaning of the pre-battle letter. Writing home does not mean the soldier believes he is about to die. Often it means he understands that the next opportunity may be days away. Once a unit attacks, it may march all night, dig positions, repel counterattacks, change sectors, lose its baggage, or move again before dawn. A rifleman cannot casually sit down with stationery while his platoon is clearing houses. The quiet before H-hour may be the last predictable pause on the schedule, so he uses it. He writes about everything except what he is actually thinking, because what he is thinking may be impossible to put on paper. There is another reason. The letter creates control in a situation where control is disappearing. The soldier cannot decide whether German artillery finds his foxhole. He cannot decide whether a mine lies beneath the next patch of mud. He cannot decide whether his tank support arrives, or whether a replacement beside him freezes during his first night at the front. But he can decide what his mother reads. He can decide whether she spends the next 2 weeks terrified. So he writes, "Everything is okay." He describes the weather as lousy rather than deadly. He jokes about army cooking. He promises to write again. Sometimes that promise is the only certainty he can manufacture. On November 9th, the offensive continues. The Germans begin recovering from the shock. Delme Ridge becomes a major obstacle. American infantry now fights an enemy who understands the direction of the attack and begins organizing artillery and anti-tank defenses accordingly. Engineers repair crossings while floodwater threatens bridges behind the assault troops. The terrain funnels vehicles onto roads already crowded with tanks, half-tracks, ammunition trucks, ambulances, jeeps, and wrecks. Traffic control becomes a tactical problem. German artillery observers need only find the right road junction to create chaos. The American advance continues, but the pace increasingly belongs to mud rather than pattern. On November 10th, Bulk commits the 11th Panzer Division. The Panthers are dangerous, but the division faces an impossible requirement. It must react across a front roughly 12 miles wide. A concentrated armored counterattack might rupture one American penetration, but concentrating means leaving another sector exposed. German commanders have spent years exploiting enemy hesitation with rapid counterstrokes. Now they are confronting an opponent that can create several crises simultaneously and supply each one with artillery. The 11th Panzer Division attacks and maneuvers, but every gallon of gasoline it burns, and every tank it loses, is increasingly difficult for Germany to replace. The Panthers appear through rain and mist like moving fortresses. Their frontal armor can shrug off many hits from the standard American 75mm Sherman gun. American tank crews learn to seek flanks, use tank destroyers, call artillery, or maneuver, rather than duel, at the Panthers' strongest angle. A single German tank positioned near a road can halt an entire column long enough for artillery to arrive. Yet the Panther has its own problems. It is heavy. Mud punishes it. Mechanical failures matter. Fuel matters. Bridges matter. A perfect weapon on the wrong road at the wrong time may contribute less than an ordinary Sherman supported by radios, recovery vehicles, engineers, and 10 more Shermans behind it. This is another point German officers cannot ignore. American equipment is not always individually superior, but American systems are resilient. A destroyed vehicle is often replaced. A damaged bridge is rebuilt. A depleted infantry company receives replacements. A failed attack becomes the subject of new instructions. The Wehrmacht in 1941 has often won by forcing enemy systems to collapse faster than they can recover. In Lorraine in late 1944, Germany increasingly faces the reverse problem. It can inflict punishment, sometimes severe punishment, yet the American machine continues reconstructing itself. The question is no longer whether German tactical skill can hurt Third Army. It can. The question is whether Germany can hurt it faster than the United States can replace what is lost. On November 11th, Combat Command B of the 6th Armored Division wins a bridgehead across the Nied, near Sanry-sur-Nied. The advance threatens German supply routes toward Falkmont and St. Avold. Alarm spreads upward through SIIC's corps, and Army Group G bulk orders countermeasures. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt at OB West releases additional forces. The 36th Volksgrenadier Division moves toward the threatened sector. The 21st Panzer Division is also brought in. What begins 3 days earlier as Patton's rain-soaked gamble is now forcing the German command to spend reserves it desperately needs elsewhere. But the Americans are suffering too. Rain remains relentless. The 6th Armored Division cannot simply explode through the bridgehead as Patton's doctrine would prefer. Anti-tank guns cover minefields, craters block roads, vehicles bunch up, infantry advances into woods, where visibility may shrink to a few dozen yards. The Germans understand these spaces. A concealed Panzerfaust team can allow the first Sherman to pass, fire into the second, and trap a column between wrecks. American troops answer with artillery, machine guns, rifle grenades, flamethrowers, and patient clearing operations. The battle becomes slower, uglier, and increasingly intimate. By November 13th, elements of the 21st Panzer Division are arriving against the 6th Armored Division. On paper, the name sounds formidable. In reality, the formation reflects Germany's crisis. General Edgar Feuchtinger's division has roughly 19 tanks, 3 assault guns, and 4 armored infantry battalions, containing only about 60 to 70 riflemen each when committed in this sector. Germany is still producing dangerous weapons and still fielding experienced officers, but many divisions retain their titles after losing the strength those titles once represented. American soldiers cannot see the German order of battle. The rifleman in a foxhole does not know that the enemy battalion opposite him may be half strength. If a machine gun is firing at him, it is 100% effective from his perspective. If a Panther rounds the corner, the total number of Panthers remaining in Germany becomes irrelevant. This difference between strategic weakness and tactical danger defines the final months of the war. Historians can see German collapse approaching. Soldiers see only the next tree line. That is why letters written before attacks so often contain no sense that victory is inevitable. The men closest to winning rarely feel as though they are standing inside a victory. The American home front feels unimaginably distant. A letter may take days or weeks to cross that distance. A mother reading it cannot know precisely when it was written, relative to the battle she sees reported in newspapers. By the time she unfolds the paper, her son may have crossed 2 rivers, changed towns, been wounded, or disappeared into a replacement depot. The letter is therefore a delayed version of a man. It preserves him at one moment. He is alive when the pen touches paper. He is alive when he signs his name. Everything after that remains unknown to the reader until another letter arrives. That fact gives wartime correspondence its haunting power. On June 3, 1944, only days before D-Day, Coast Guardsman Jack D'Annunzio writes his final letter to his mother after his crew has learned that an invasion is approaching. His landing craft, LCI-94, is soon heading toward Normandy. The letter survives because paper can outlive the person who writes it. Similar examples appear throughout the war. Men write before operations because waiting encourages thought, because postal systems encourage communication, and because no soldier can be certain what follows the next dawn. By November, the scale is different but the psychology is the same. Before a battalion attack, the company clerk may collect outgoing mail. Before a man leaves a billet, he may finish one more page. He does not write tactical details. He may not even admit an attack is coming. Censorship rules prevent dangerous information, and self-censorship prevents something else, fear, from reaching home. The result is often a letter that seems strangely cheerful compared with the circumstances surrounding it. A soldier sitting under artillery fire can write about socks. A man preparing to cross a river can ask whether the family car still runs. Normality becomes camouflage of a different kind. German officers observing captured Americans, captured mail, abandoned positions, and the rhythms of American operations inevitably confront that cultural connection. These troops remain tied to civilian life, in a way Nazi ideology considers weakness. Yet the connection may be precisely what sustains them. The American soldier is not usually fighting because he wants to remain a soldier forever. He fights because he wants the war to end so he can stop being one. The letter reminds him what ending means. Home is not an abstraction printed on a propaganda poster. It has an address. The same attachment shapes American attitudes toward casualties. German military culture carries traditions of endurance, obedience, sacrifice, and Auftragstaktik that produce extraordinary tactical resilience. But by 1944, those traditions are increasingly trapped inside Hitler's demand to hold positions regardless of operational logic. American commanders can be wasteful, and American infantry certainly suffers appalling losses in many battles, but the broader system prefers firepower to unnecessary sacrifice. If an artillery battalion can destroy a position, commanders generally prefer shells to bodies. If tanks can support infantry, tanks are used. If engineers can bridge a river before men drown attempting improvised crossings, engineers are brought forward. The German battle experiences criticize Americans for attacks that appear riskless or limited in objective. Yet the criticism reveals the difference. To a German officer formed by years of war and increasingly desperate defensive doctrine, excessive preparation can look timid. To an American commander responsible for replacing dead riflemen, preparation looks rational. The United States possesses ammunition in quantities Germany cannot match. Refusing to use that advantage would not be courage, it would be stupidity. So artillery fires first, then tanks move, then infantry closes, and when the method fails, the Americans study the failure and try something else. The offensive continues eastward through village after village. German formations retreat toward new defensive lines. The 48th Division is reduced to less than regimental strength and lacks heavy weapons. On the night of November 13 to 14, the 36th Volksgrenadier Division begins relieving it. The 559th Volksgrenadier Division is also badly damaged. Yet resistance does not vanish. German artillery batteries shift north. Roads are mined. Bridges are destroyed. Rear guards occupy stone houses. The American schedule stretches. Each delay gives the Germans another night to dig. Each night gives American soldiers another chance, perhaps, to write. Then comes Metz. Patton has wanted the fortress city neutralized for weeks. Its fortifications represent layers of military history, including massive works dating from the German annexation after the Franco-Prussian War. American forces attack around and through the city, while other Third Army units continue toward the Saar. The 95th Infantry Division fights into Metz itself. The 90th Infantry Division crosses the Moselle north of the city. The 5th Infantry Division attacks from the south and west. Forts that look obsolete on maps prove capable of absorbing shellfire and delaying infantry. Metz becomes another reminder that old fortifications can still kill modern armies. By November 22, organized resistance inside Metz is largely broken, and the city falls to American troops. Although isolated forts continue holding out, Patton can claim an achievement no attacking army has managed easily in modern times. But there is little triumphal glamour for the infantrymen. Streets are filled with rubble, buildings burn, civilians emerge from cellars, prisoners march west, Americans sleep wherever roofs remain, then orders arrive to continue east. The war does not pause to congratulate anyone. The same soldier who survives one battle may be ordered into another before his family even learns the first has ended. This explains the not after part better than any romantic interpretation. After an attack, the survivor is busy surviving the consequences. He has wounded friends to evacuate, ammunition to redistribute, prisoners to search, positions to dig, weapons to clean, rations to find, orders to receive. He may discover that the company mail orderly is missing, the truck carrying personal baggage is miles behind, or the platoon has lost half its men. The next German counterattack may begin before darkness. Writing after battle requires a kind of normality. Battle has just destroyed. Writing before battle requires only waiting, and waiting is everywhere in war. Men wait for H-hour, wait for artillery, wait for engineers, wait for darkness, wait for trucks, wait for replacements, wait for mail, wait for a medic, wait for orders to move, wait for morning. The popular image of war is continuous motion, but soldiers experience long periods of anticipation, interrupted by moments of terrifying acceleration. The letter belongs to the waiting. It gives the hands something to do, and the mind somewhere else to live, while the body remains beside a rifle in France. By late November, Third Army is pressing toward the Saar River and the West Wall. The weather continues punishing men almost as severely as the enemy. Trench foot becomes epidemic across American armies. Feet remain wet for days, skin swells, changes color, loses circulation. Men who never receive a bullet are evacuated because they can no longer walk. During November, Third Army records tens of thousands of non-battle casualties, a reminder that cold and water can remove soldiers from combat as effectively as shell fragments. The army responds with clean socks, inspections, discipline, and education, but the environment remains merciless. German soldiers endure the same rain and cold, often with fewer supplies. Their advantage is that they are retreating toward their own country, closer to established defensive infrastructure. Their disadvantage is almost everything else. Allied aircraft dominate whenever weather allows flying. American artillery ammunition remains plentiful. German fuel stocks continue shrinking. Replacement formations arrive with older men, young recruits, convalescents, transferred personnel, and limited training. Panthers still appear. 88mm guns still kill. Experienced NCOs still organize deadly defenses. But the Wehrmacht is consuming resources it cannot regenerate. The American soldier senses that Germany is weakening, but cannot assume the enemy is finished. Every village can still become a fight. Every road can still be mined. Every church tower can conceal an observer. Every woods can hold mortars. When an American patrol disappears into fog, the men behind it wait for rifle fire. When nothing happens, that silence may be worse. It gives imagination room to work. A man can convince himself that a German machine gun sits behind every hedge. Then an artillery round lands nearby, and imagination becomes unnecessary. The letters rarely capture this accurately, not because the writers are dishonest, but because fear is difficult to mail. A son does not want his mother picturing him crawling through mud beside a dead friend. A husband does not want his wife waking every night because he described a panther shell tearing through a tank. A father does not want his children remembering him as terrified. So the letters filter combat. This produces one of history's strangest archives. Millions of documents from men at war that often spend more space discussing weather, food, packages, money, loneliness, and home than killing. That ordinary language is itself historical evidence. It reveals what soldiers value when the extraordinary becomes routine. German intelligence may measure the American army in divisions, guns, tanks, and fuel dumps. But the individual American measures his existence in letters received and letters owed. I got your letter. Sorry I haven't written. Tell everyone hello. Don't worry. These phrases appear because maintaining relationships becomes work, and soldiers perform that work under conditions civilians can scarcely imagine. In a foxhole, writing, "Don't worry," can require more courage than describing the truth. By December, German training staffs are codifying their observations of American methods. They describe weaknesses they hope German troops can exploit: dependence on heavy support, reluctance in certain forms of close fighting, patterns in attack timing, vulnerabilities at night. But they also acknowledge strengths. American artillery is accurate and responsive. Combined arms cooperation is effective. Leadership adapts. Radio silence before major operations can deceive German intelligence. The Americans may seem cautious, but caution backed by thousands of guns, endless trucks, and rapidly improving tactical experience is becoming extremely difficult to stop. The line about Americans writing home before the attack therefore becomes symbolic of a larger German misunderstanding. What looks like softness can coexist with combat effectiveness. What looks like excessive attachment to comfort can coexist with endurance. What looks like caution can coexist with aggression once preparation is complete. The American soldier does not need to become indifferent to death in order to fight. He can be deeply afraid of dying, intensely attached to home, furious about being cold, desperate for mail, and still climb out of his foxhole when ordered forward. That distinction matters because totalitarian military ideology often treats emotional hardness as proof of martial superiority. The Nazis celebrate sacrifice as virtue in itself. The American citizen soldier is more likely to ask why the sacrifice is necessary. He wants artillery support. He wants tanks. He wants evacuation if wounded. He wants hot food when possible. He wants his mail. None of these desires make him incapable of fighting. In fact, an army that provides them may sustain combat power longer because soldiers believe the institution behind them intends, at least in principle, to bring them home alive. The German army increasingly cannot offer the same promise. Hitler demands positions be held beyond usefulness. Retreat becomes politically dangerous for commanders. Entire formations can be sacrificed to preserve symbolic ground. German soldiers still fight with extraordinary determination, sometimes from conviction, sometimes discipline, sometimes comradeship, sometimes fear of Soviet captivity, sometimes because there is nowhere else to go. But by late 1944, Germany's strategic situation is collapsing beneath them. The Rhine remains ahead of the Americans, yet Germany no longer possesses the resources required to reverse the balance of the war. Then, on December 16th, everything appears to change. Far north of Lorraine, German forces explode through the Ardennes. Hitler has concentrated armor, infantry, and fuel for one final major offensive in the west. American units are surprised. The front ruptures. Towns fall. Rumors race through headquarters. The German objective reaches toward Antwerp, seeking to split the British and American armies. Suddenly, Third Army's eastward offensive loses priority. Patton is summoned to Verdun, where senior commanders confront the crisis. What happens next demonstrates the same organizational quality German officers have been studying. Patton claims he can turn Third Army north toward Bastogne with extraordinary speed. Plans already exist because his staff has considered the possibility. Units disengage, change direction, reroute supply columns, and begin moving through winter roads. An army that has spent weeks attacking east now pivots north. On December 22nd, elements begin major attacks toward the besieged 101st Airborne Division. On December 26th, the 4th Armored Division breaks through to Bastogne. The ability to improvise is not magic. It rests on staffs, radios, trucks, engineers, fuel systems, maps, discipline, and preparation. Some of the same men who have written letters before attacks in Lorraine now write before attacks in Luxembourg and Belgium. Christmas approaches. Snow replaces rain. Frozen foxholes replace flooded ones. Packages from home contain food, socks, cigarettes, photographs, and cards. Artillery echoes across forests. A soldier may read, "Merry Christmas," beside a road where burned vehicles are frozen into the landscape. The distance between the words on the page and the world around him could hardly be greater, yet that distance is exactly why the page matters. The war continues into 1945. American forces eventually cross the Rhine. German cities fall. Concentration camps are liberated, revealing crimes whose scale many soldiers have not imagined. Units that once prepare attacks in Normandy, Lorraine, the Hürtgen Forest, and the Ardennes advance through Germany itself. Letters continue moving in both directions. Some announce survival, some prepare families for wounds, some stop without explanation, followed by the telegram every family fears. The postal chain connecting battlefield and home becomes one of the most intimate records of what victory costs. In Lorraine alone, Third Army pays heavily. Official campaign accounting records 55,182 battle casualties between September 1st and December 18th, including 6,657 killed, while tens of thousands more are evacuated for illness, exposure, exhaustion, and other non-battle causes. At least 75,000 German prisoners passed through Third Army cages during the campaign, while German killed and wounded cannot be calculated with the same precision. Third Army also loses hundreds of tanks and more than 11,000 vehicles to destruction or damage during the period. The campaign is an attritional victory, but attrition is simply a clean military word for thousands of private catastrophes. Strategically, Lorraine matters because the Germans cannot afford those exchanges. An American tank destroyed in November may be replaced. A damaged truck may be repaired. A rifle company can receive new men, however brutal the replacement system feels to those men. Germany's losses increasingly become permanent reductions. Divisions shrink, fuel disappears, artillery ammunition becomes scarcer. The Luftwaffe appears only intermittently. When German commanders study the Americans, the frightening truth is not that every American soldier is superior. He is not. The frightening truth is that the American soldier belongs to a system capable of surviving mistakes on a scale Germany can no longer afford. And yet the most revealing objects carried through that system are sometimes not weapons at all. A letter weighs almost nothing. It cannot penetrate armor. It cannot bridge a river. It cannot stop a machine gun. But it tells us why the man carrying the rifle still imagines a future beyond the next attack. That future might include a farm in Iowa, an apartment in Brooklyn, a factory in Detroit, a classroom in Ohio, a fishing boat in Massachusetts, or a wife waiting beside a radio in California. The addresses change. The psychological function does not. This is why the image of Americans writing before attacks survives so powerfully. It compresses an entire military culture into one scene. A soldier sits under dim light with artillery muttering beyond the horizon. His rifle is cleaned. His ammunition is ready. His unit has orders. Trucks are moving outside. Engineers are preparing bridges. Officers are checking watches. Somewhere across the line, German soldiers are strengthening positions. The American takes out a piece of paper and writes home because, for a few more minutes, he controls something the battle cannot yet touch. He may know that some of the men around him will not return. He may suspect he could be one of them, but he usually does not write a grand farewell. Most letters are not dramatic. That is precisely what makes them devastating decades later. They talk about ordinary things because ordinary things represent the life war has interrupted. They say, "Send more cookies. Tell Dad I received his note. I owe my sister a letter. I hope we can go fishing when I get back. I am doing fine. Do not worry about me." Then the paper is folded, addressed, censored, collected, and carried west while the writer moves east. German officers can observe American artillery and count tanks. They can interrogate prisoners and study captured field orders. They can calculate that American attacks often begin after careful preparation. They can warn their troops that American infantry prefers overwhelming support. But what is harder to measure is the psychological strength of a soldier who expects normal life to exist after war. That expectation can make him cautious because he wants to survive. It can also make him relentless because every mile forward seems to shorten the road home. For German commanders in 1944, the contradiction becomes increasingly uncomfortable. They face an enemy they have been taught to consider decadent, yet that enemy absorbs casualties and continues. They face soldiers who openly dislike hardship, yet cross flooded rivers in freezing rain. They face commanders accused of excessive caution, yet those commanders launch a major offensive in weather German intelligence considers nearly impossible. They face troops who write sentimental letters to mothers and girlfriends, then advance behind 20,000 artillery rounds into fortified villages. The categories Nazi propaganda depends upon begin failing one by one. The American soldier is neither invulnerable nor universally heroic. Some panic, some break, some surrender, some make mistakes that kill friends. Some become brutal. Some are exhausted beyond usefulness. Some resent replacements. Some hate officers. Some simply endure until they are wounded or the war ends. The German reports are correct about certain tactical weaknesses and wrong about others. But the fundamental mistake is assuming that emotional attachment and military effectiveness are opposites. They are not. A man can desperately want to live and still fight. That is the larger lesson hidden inside the letters. Courage is often imagined as the absence of fear, but battle repeatedly demonstrates something more complicated. Men are afraid because they have futures worth losing. They carry photographs because faces matter. They save letters because words matter. They complain about discomfort because comfort exists somewhere in memory. They count days because time has meaning beyond the battlefield. The military machine can train them to shoot, march, maneuver, and obey. But the reason many continue doing those things comes from a world the military did not create. When the surviving veterans finally return home, many of their letters return with them. Families keep bundles tied with string. Some remain in drawers for decades. Others are donated to museums and archives. Historians read them beside operational reports and casualty tables. The contrast is extraordinary. Headquarters records say a regiment crosses the Sale at 0600. A letter written hours earlier asks whether the dog still sleeps beside the kitchen stove. An after-action report lists 100 casualties. A mother keeps a page, saying her son expects to be home by next Christmas. History exists in the space between those documents. The German officers studying American tactics in late 1944 never possessed the advantage we have now. They see only fragments. They see the artillery, the tanks, the trucks, the prisoners, the dead, the abandoned equipment, the captured letters. They see a military culture that seems almost excessively connected to civilian life. What they cannot fully see is that this connection is part of American staying power. The United States is not asking most of these soldiers to become permanent warriors. It is asking them to finish a job and return to the lives described in their mail. By the spring of 1945, that job approaches its end in Europe. German resistance fractures. Units surrender by the thousands. Roads fill with prisoners. American columns move through towns where white sheets hang from windows. On May 8th, the war in Europe ends. For the survivors, the direction of travel eventually reverses. They move toward ports, ships, trains, camps, and finally homes, whose details they have been writing about for years. Some discover relationships changed while they were away. Some struggle with memories they never described in letters. Some rarely speak about combat again. And in countless homes, families preserve correspondence from men who do not return. Those letters become voices without futures. A page dated before an attack may be the last evidence of what a man expects his life to become. That knowledge gives the phrase, "before the attack, not after," its deepest meaning. It is not really about postal schedules. It is about uncertainty. Before battle, every soldier remains a possibility. After battle, possibilities have been divided into survivors, wounded, prisoners, missing, and dead. On November 8, 1944, in the flooded fields of Lorraine, none of those categories is settled when the artillery begins. The 26th, 35th, and 80th Divisions move forward. Engineers fight the rivers. Tanks fight the mud. German grenadiers emerge from shattered trenches. Panthers move toward threatened sectors. American batteries fire until gun crews are exhausted. Medics work in rain. Trucks grind along destroyed roads. Men disappear into villages whose names their families have never heard. And somewhere behind them, letters already begin traveling west. Those letters do not prove that American soldiers believe they will die. They prove that they understand they might, while still insisting on speaking as though life will continue. That distinction separates fatalism from courage. Fatalism says there is no future. Courage acts despite knowing the future is uncertain. The soldier who writes, "See you when I get home," before walking toward German guns, is not denying death. He is refusing to let death define him before it happens. That is why the most important preparation before an attack may sometimes be the smallest. Not loading the rifle, not tightening the helmet strap, not checking the grenade pin. Those are preparations for battle. The letter is preparation for remaining human. It reminds the writer that he possesses a name beyond his serial number, a family beyond his unit, and a future beyond the next objective. And when armies become machines capable of destroying entire landscapes, preserving that private identity becomes a quiet form of resistance against what war tries to make of everyone inside it. German officers can study American tactics, mock American caution, fear American artillery, and count American tanks, but the letter written before H hour reveals something no battlefield intelligence report can measure. The American soldier advances, not because he has forgotten home, but because he remembers exactly what he is trying to survive for.